The moment their Uber disappeared around the corner, Daniel found the envelope. It was tucked beneath the welcome mat, the one that said "Home, Sweet Home" in cheerful yellow letters, and his name was written on the front in his sister's handwriting. Neat, careful, the handwriting of someone who had planned this. He stood on the porch in his socks, Biscuit the golden retriever sitting obediently at his feet, and stared at the envelope for a long moment before he opened it. Inside was a single index card. "Don't go in the basement, Daniel." That was all it said. His sister Marissa had called him 3 weeks ago with the sweetest voice she ever used, the one she reserved for favors that were not actually favors. "We booked Chalum," she'd said. "Marcus and I 2 weeks. The kids are going to his mother's. We just need someone to watch Biscuit, and you know how he gets at the kennel. He had that meltdown last time, remember? Chewed through the chain link fence and they said they'd never." "How long?" Daniel had asked. 14 days. 14 days. "You can work from our house. It's bigger than your apartment. You've got the guest room, the big TV, the hot tub. Honestly, Daniel, you'd be doing yourself a favor." He was between projects. His lease was month to month. He had no compelling reason to say no, and Marissa knew it. "Fine," he'd said. She had sent him the house key, the alarm code, the vet's number, and Biscuit's feeding schedule. But she had not mentioned the envelope under the mat. She had not mentioned the basement at all. Daniel was 34 years old. He had a master's degree in civil engineering. He believed in load-bearing calculations, in tensile strength, in the measured predictability of physical forces. He did not believe in things that went bump in the night. He did not believe in superstitions or warnings scrawled on index cards by his older sister. He stood at the top of the basement stairs with his hand on the light switch and Biscuit at his side. The dog was not going down there. That much was obvious. Biscuit had planted himself at the door like a furry yellow roadblock and was watching Daniel with the patient, mournful eyes of a creature that knew things humans refused to accept. "It's probably just a water heater issue," Daniel said aloud. "Or mold. She probably just doesn't want me to see the mold." Biscuit made no sound. Daniel flipped the switch. A fluorescent light stuttered on below, casting the kind of pale, clinical glow that made everything look faintly institutional. Concrete walls, a wooden workbench, cardboard boxes stacked along the far wall, a water heater in the corner exactly as predicted. Everything normal, everything fine. He went back upstairs, fed Biscuit his dinner, opened a beer, and didn't think about it again. Not that night, anyway. The calls started on day 3. Marissa and Marcus had arrived in Chalum without incident. He'd gotten the obligatory photo, 2 people in sunglasses standing on a beach, smiling the smiles of people who had successfully outsourced their responsibilities. He'd texted back a thumbs up. He'd meant it sincerely. But on day 3, just after midnight, his phone lit up with her number. "Are you in the basement?" she asked without saying hello. "I'm in bed," he said. "Why are you calling at midnight?" "Just checking." A pause. "Don't go in the basement, Daniel." "You already told me that. What's in the basement, Marissa?" "Nothing, just promise me." "I'm an adult, you can't just." "Promise me." He promised. He hung up. He lay in the dark and listened to Biscuit snoring on the floor beside the bed, and he thought about how strange it was that a woman currently lying on a beach in Mexico would spend any portion of her vacation calling her brother to ask about the basement. He lasted until day 5. Here is what he found. In the far corner of the basement, behind the water heater, behind a stack of boxes marked Holiday in black marker, there was a door. Not a storage door, not a crawl space hatch. A proper door, painted the same concrete gray as the wall around it, with a handle that had been wiped clean of dust. Recently wiped. The rest of the boxes were filmed with a fine layer of the stuff. The door was not. Someone had been using it. Daniel stood in front of it for a long time. Biscuit had followed him this far. Apparently his oath of basement neutrality had its limits, and sat pressed against Daniel's leg with the full weight of his 30-pound body, vibrating slightly. She said don't go in the basement, Daniel reasoned. She didn't say anything about a door inside the basement, technically. Biscuit pressed harder against his leg. Daniel opened the door. It was a room. Just a room perhaps 8 feet by 10, with a low ceiling and a single bare bulb hanging from a cord. The walls were painted a deep, warm red. There was a small table in the center with 2 chairs. On the table was a chessboard mid-game, and on the far wall there was a whiteboard covered edge to edge in dense, careful handwriting. Names, hundreds of them. Daniel stepped closer. Each name had a date next to it, and beside each date a single sentence. He scanned them, reading fragments. July 14, 1987, asked if I was real. March 3, 1995, said I looked lonely. November 29, 2003, brought me a sandwich. February 7, 2011, cried, didn't know I was watching. April 19, 2019, played chess with me until 4 a.m. His own name was at the bottom of the list. March 10, 2026, found the door. Daniel backed out of the room. He closed the door. He walked up the stairs with Biscuit pressed so close against his legs that he nearly tripped twice. He sat down on the living room couch and stared at the wall and waited for the rational explanation to arrive. It took a while. He called Marissa at 7 a.m., which was 6 a.m. in Chelum, which he felt was more than justified. She answered on the second ring. She was awake. She had been waiting. You went in, she said. There's a room, he said. In the basement with a whiteboard, my name is on it. Silence. Marissa. Okay, she said. Okay, I'm going to explain and I need you to hear the whole thing before you say anything. Can you do that? He could. The house had been in Marcus's family since 1962. It was his grandmother's house first, then his parents', then his. The room in the basement had been there from the beginning, though no one in the family fully agreed on what it was or who had built it. What they agreed on was the man. He appeared by family consensus when the house was empty, or nearly empty. He sat in the red room and played chess against himself and occasionally against the people who found him. He was old or seemed old, with white hair and careful hands and the manner of someone who had nowhere particular to be and no urgency about getting there. He had never hurt anyone. He had never asked for anything. When you left, he stayed. When you returned with others, he was gone. Grandma Alois called him the tenant, Marissa said. She said he'd been there since before she bought the house. She tried to make him leave once back in the 60s. He just looked at her and said, very politely, that he wasn't sure he could. That's not an explanation, Daniel said. No, she agreed, it isn't. Who is he? We don't know. Marcus's family has asked him over the years. He gives different names. He knows things about the family that he shouldn't, things no one told him. He knew Marcus's grandfather had a twin who died at birth. No one alive knew that. They found it in old records afterward. And you just lived with this. He leaves the upstairs entirely alone, Daniel. He's never once come up from the basement. The rule in Marcus's family is that you don't go down there unless you're ready for the conversation, and you don't bring strangers into it without telling them first. Her voice dipped. I should have told you. I know. I thought if I told you not to go down, you wouldn't go down. You know me, he said. I know you, she agreed, with something that was almost a laugh. You have the same problem Marcus does. You can't leave a locked door alone. Daniel went back to the basement that afternoon. He stood outside the gray door for a long time. Then he knocked. Come in, said a voice, even, unhurried, as if it had been expecting him. The man was seated at the chess table. He was old, yes. The kind of old that comes from a great many years lived quietly, with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that were very dark and very attentive. He was wearing a gray sweater. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "You play?" the man asked. "Badly," Daniel said. "Sit down." Daniel sat. Biscuit, who had followed him to the door but refused to cross the threshold, made a low sound and then went quiet. "Your sister should have warned you," the man said, resetting the board with practiced ease. "She warned me not to come down here." "Same thing," he looked up briefly. "You're the engineer." "How did you know that?" The man's expression didn't change. He placed the last pawn with precision and folded his hands. "Marissa mentioned it the last time she visited." A pause. 3 years ago." "She never said she visited you." "Most people don't mention it," he said simply. "It's a difficult thing to explain in conversation, white or black." Daniel looked at the board. White. They played for 2 hours. Daniel lost the first game in 20 minutes. He did better in the second, managed to take the man's queen before the end, which the man acknowledged with a small nod that felt, somehow, like high praise. Between moves, they talked. Or rather, Daniel asked questions, and the man answered some of them, and deflected others with a patience that suggested he had been doing exactly this for a very long time. "How long have you been here?" Daniel asked. "Here in this house, or here in general?" "Either." "A long time," the man said. "That's not an answer." "No," the man agreed, "it isn't." "Does it bother you?" Daniel asked, during the third game. "People coming down here and staring at you like you're something from a museum?" The man considered this for a moment, moving his knight in the fluid, automatic way of someone who stopped consciously playing chess decades ago. "Less than you might expect," he said. "Most people bring good questions. Some bring food, which is appreciated. Your predecessor, a young woman named Vanessa, Marcus's cousin, brought a sandwich and a paperback novel. We talked about the book for 4 hours." "What was it?" "Something about a lighthouse." He looked up. "She cried near the end. She didn't know I was watching." He glanced at the whiteboard. "I keep notes." "I saw," Daniel said. "Why?" The man's gaze moved to the long white wall with its careful columns of names and dates and fragments of moments. His expression was not wistful, exactly. It was something quieter than that, something still. "Because they're worth keeping," he said. "Because people come down here alone and they ask real questions and they say true things and then they go back upstairs and the world takes them away and they don't always remember what they said. But I do." He looked at the board. "Your move." Daniel moved his bishop. "And what will you write about me?" The man looked at him for a long moment. "I'll write that you knocked first," he said. "Most people don't." Daniel stayed in Marissa and Marcus's house for the full 2 weeks. He fed Biscuit his dinner every night at 6. He worked from the guest room and used the hot tub once and watched 3 seasons of a show he'd been meaning to get to for years. And every afternoon, he went to the basement. Some days they played chess. Some days they talked about engineering. The man had opinions, surprisingly informed ones, about tension and load, and the way structures either accepted weight or didn't. Some days they sat in easy silence and Daniel read, while the man did something with a small wooden puzzle he kept on the table. On the last day, as Daniel was packing the guest room, and Biscuit was watching with the tragic eyes of a dog who understood exactly what luggage meant, he went downstairs one final time. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "I know," the man said. "Will you still be here if I come back?" The man tilted his head slightly, that small, precise gesture that Daniel had come to understand as yes. "What should I bring?" Daniel asked. The man thought about it. "Something good to read," he said, "and if it isn't too much trouble." "Sandwich," Daniel said. The man smiled. It was a small smile, brief and careful, but it was real. "Sandwich," he agreed. Daniel drove back to his apartment the next afternoon. He called Marissa from the highway. "You talked to him," she said. "We played chess. Did he tell you his name?" Daniel thought about it. On the second day he had asked again, more directly. The man had given him a name, short, quiet, old-fashioned. Daniel had written it in his notebook. He hadn't shared it with anyone. "No," he said. A pause. "That's interesting," Marissa said. "He told Marcus's grandmother his name." "What was it?" "She never wrote it down," Marissa said. "Said it was the kind of name you don't write down." Another pause. "Are you okay, Daniel?" He thought about the whiteboard, his name at the bottom, found the door. He thought about what the man would add now, the full sentence of it, the true and permanent record of 2 weeks in a red room at the bottom of a house in the middle of an ordinary street. "Yeah," he said, "I'm good." He meant it.